Ledger is a writing podcast and a place where even drawing is considered writing. Welcome to today's show. I'm your host, Austin Wilson. I am currently on my second cold in less than a month, so I apologize for my current energy/voice levels if you can perceive how sick I am. But I wasn't sick when I recorded the episode, which was back in August, with guest Ryan Claytor. Ryan is a cartoonist, a designer, a teacher. He's a freaking pinball wizard. Trust me. And I'm actually one of many stops on the digital and AFK book tour that he's doing for his brand new book, which is called One Bite at a Time, The First 20 Years of Elephant Eater Comics. You can actually purchase the book right now, onebiteatatimebook.com, along with a bunch of other stuff that he's done. Definitely go take a look at it because it's all cool. His book is a trip back through time all the way to 2004, and you go on a journey with Ryan as he's exploring his own style through multiple forms of creativity. He even dives into his own psyche through autobiocomics, and you got some digital and print design in there. There's neon signs, watch faces, freaking like insanely detailed pinball manuals, a lot of really interesting stuff that you probably maybe wouldn't be looking at otherwise. It's a lot of cool stuff all put into one place because of where Ryan's creativity has taken him. And honestly, the best thing for you to do after listening to this, or even before, whenever, is go buy the book. First of all, it's just magnificent to behold. It's beautiful. It's cloth bound. It's got gold painted edges. It's a big coffee table book. There's vellum overlays inside of these like intricately illustrated pinball machines. Honestly, it's really just an awesome love letter to creativity and the art of the physical object. And Ryan stopped by to talk about his path as a creative person, from, starting at Marvel Comics as an intern to doing autobio cartoonists and then becoming a totally unhinged pinball devotee, but like in a fun way, not in a scary way. We talk about his shiny basketball shorts, and we talk about, an old Ledger style, existential crises as well. So have fun with that one. But yeah, make sure you go to elephanteater.com, check out all of his work, but also definitely go to onebiteatatimebook.com. That will lead you directly to a link to buy the book itself. And as for my stuff, I have so much stuff to update everyone on. I've been super busy with a lot of projects, but for now, just go to austinrwilson.com. You can buy print or digital copies of Dynasty of Blood, my satanic panic fiction that's there. If you happen to be at the Austin Film Festival this year, which is 2024, and I mean the one that's actually in Texas, not just the one that I have at my house, hey, I'm going to be there. If you see me, say hi. I'm a bald guy with glasses and a plaid shirt. It'll be like your own little game of Where's Waldo. I have so much more to share, but in short, hey, I'm going to be a bookseller. I'm going to have a little brick and mortar bookstore and a space. I can't wait to tell you guys more about it. I'm following in the footsteps of one of my heroes, Kathleen Kelly. I'm just so excited to tell you more. So watch out for news about that. But as for now, here's my chat with cartoonist Ryan Claytor. I didn't know that you interned at Marvel. I'm so interested to dive into some of this stuff that I got to read about in the book that I didn't know. Awesome. Interned at Marvel. Got your MFA in Fine Arts from San Diego State, and it seems like that was you said you had dabbled in comics. In the book, you said you had some other projects before you started doing some autobio stuff, and I'm really curious about the beginning and choosing autobio, especially after you intern at Marvel. So I'm really curious about the path that led you to choosing to write and illustrate and cartoon autobio comics. So kind of walk me through that.
Cool. Yeah, happy to. You say when? Are we recording right now?
We're doing it.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry.
No, we're doing it, man.
I was waiting for the recording announcement. Sorry.
No, we're on.
Okay, cool. Well, first, thank you so much for having me on here, Austin. We've chat outside of this, and I'm a big fan of the show and what you do here. So thank you publicly. Absolutely. For your time and for doing this show, man. It's such a winner. It's the writing podcast I tell people about, so I'm glad you're doing it.
Thank you very much.
With that said, origins, yes. So like I read comics as a kid, 6, 7, 8 or so. I was into the Disney comics, mainly the Duck books, Donald and Uncle Scrooge. And as I aged up a little bit, maybe 10, 11-ish, I started appreciating satire, getting into Sergio Aragonés, Grew the Wanderer, Mad Magazine. And then I kind of forgot about comics for almost a decade until the end of my undergrad year. And a buddy of mine was into comics, and I was lucky enough to have a decrepit car my senior year, and he asked me if I'd take him to the comic book store. And I'm like, yeah, sure, I used to do that, so I'll take you there. And so I'm kind of bumming around the aisles while he's getting what he's getting, and ran into this work by my old favorite cartoonist, Sergio Aragonés. There was this trade paperback of Boogeyman, and I'm like, this looks really great. I'm gonna pick this up on a whim, and it was all over from there. I just got back into comics head over heels. I was fresh out of a studio art undergrad, so immediately my thoughts turned to making comics. And because there was no comics university programs at the time, this is in the early 2000s, the early aughts. And I started looking around for internships and found one at Marvel. And so there was sort of a catch-22. Like I applied, I got it, but they called me and they said, look, we're kind of confused. Like, are you a student or are you a teacher? And I was simultaneously teaching at a local community college and taking figure drawing classes at the same time. This is just post undergrad.
Why not both?
And I said, I'm whatever you want me to be. So,
I am the yes that you're about to give me. That's
so
it.
I said, they told me, you got to be a student. I said, okay, I can prove it. And then off I went. So I interned at Marvel. And so I was a production intern, and I was in the bullpen learning industry technical standards, how to scan an artwork, how to process that. But I also got to work with some of the last remaining talent at Marvel. So everything is farmed out. Everything is freelance now. There's no in-house artists at either of the big two. But Dave Sharp was the last in-house letterer there. And I got to work under him and just learn a ton about lettering. Very, very confident in my lettering now, thanks to him. And I sat in on print and production meetings and just learned a ton. At the same time, I was also taking some classes from the Joe Kubert School, which they weren't offering anything in the summer except kids classes. So I enrolled in a kids class. And but he's teaching stuff like foundations of building blocks, like using cubes and spheres to make larger, more complex objects, which I hadn't really had that training, and it was all new to me. And the guy teaching it, Fernando Ruiz, who has worked for Archie Comics for a long time, he was so we got friendly because I was, weird and old, 20 something at the time. And we'd chat after class, and I'm like, well, what are you up to? He's like, oh, I'm going to Kinko's and making multiple copies of my original art pages so I can sell them on eBay because I can't scan my original artwork. So I have to reduce it at the copy shop and then scan that reduction. I'm like, why don't you just scan it twice and piece it together? He's like, oh, I could never do that. That's beyond me. I'm like, Fernando, let's talk. Like, you have things that I want to know. I want to teach you things that will make your life easier. And so we started getting together after those Saturday classes and exchanging knowledge. I'd tell him about Photoshop. He'd tell me about how to cartoon. And it was just an incredible summer of comics. So my whole reason for going to Marvel was to learn from the best. I want to be able to make really great comics. And so I learned a ton that summer. It wasn't necessarily because I had a big superhero interest. I had read superhero comics as a kid and still did some when I was getting back into comics, but found myself gravitating toward more nonfiction, true to life, historical fiction, historical comics, slice of life, autobio stuff as I was getting back into comics. So I thought, well, maybe I'll try my hand at autobio, and that's where I started out.
Didn't expect a lot of that. That's all very surprising in a lot of ways. I think, especially like going to Marvel. So, did you go there knowing like I'm not really looking to create superhero stuff, or was that a thing that you kind of discovered as you were there? 'Cause you said you're kind of gravitating towards it. Was it a surprise or?
In my early 20s, I think I was just real hungry to be a part of the medium, of the
Yeah,
industry of comics. And I remember taking around a coloring portfolio at the time and showing it not only to Marvel, but also hopping over to DC Comics when I was there in New York as well. Um, uh, Coincidentally, I was at this horribly attended comic convention in California. That's where I'm from originally, shortly before heading out to New York. And everybody behind the table was miserable because they just, threw a bunch of money away on this convention that nobody attended.
yeah,
But for me, as an attendee, it was great. I got to talk to everybody. I was talking to Bob Schreck, who was at DC Comics at the time, and Jim Valentino from Image Comics, and just like, you name it, and they were accessible because nobody was there. I still think back to that and wonder how that even happened in this world. It was so crazy. So anyway, I wrote Bob Schreck when I was there and said, hey, I don't know if you remember me, convention, etc. He's like, yeah, come on up to my office. And he set up an appointment, and I got buzzed through the magic doors and sat there with Bob Schreck and showed him my coloring portfolio and said, oh, this looks really great. And he took me down a floor to show me to some other gatekeeper, and the guy was looking through my portfolio and very quiet. All of a sudden he says, what's your undercolor? I'm like, 60, 40, 40, 0. He's like, okay, that's right. And, and then Bob's like, yeah, I wouldn't bring up just any chump here. Come on, he knows what he's doing. So anyway, that means something in digital coloring and underbasing your blacks, basically. And so anyway, all that to say, I was taking around a coloring portfolio, I think not because my passion was in coloring, but because it was the thing I could get the best at most quickly. Like I already had a lot of Photoshop, Illustrator, web tool knowledge under my belt. I was teaching those classes at a community college at the time. So I started some coloring portfolio stuff and thought, well, maybe this is my in that I can use to then do more stuff. And I don't even know that I had a concrete idea in my mind in my early 20s about what more stuff might be. But the more I read, the more my interest kind of honed. I finally started finding my niche originally with autobio comics.
yeah. I think. Well, I mean, all of isn't it crazy to like sometimes the amount of things you can achieve if you just ask.
It's so
Just
incredibly true. I mean,
just ask.
Look through that book that we're talking about today, one
Yeah.
bite at a time. This big art book, showcasing 20 years of my work in comics, illustration, and design. And there's so much of that in there, like Mr. Jones watches, this national company. And over the pandemic, I got into watch collecting and really started fancying what they do over there.
Yeah.
And after looking at their work for a couple months, I finally had enough, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to hammer out an email, introduce myself. Hey, if you're ever interested in collaborating, I'd love to work with you. The next day I hear back from the company owner, Crispin Jones, your work looks great. Let's talk. And, the rest is history. And I tell this to my buddies. I have a friend here in Michigan. He's like, so what? You just asked? I'm like, yeah, that was pretty much it. He's like, oh, okay. So that's it. Got it. All right.
Yeah. Like that's what's crazy though, is like, it doesn't always work.
Right.
But it does sometimes. And if you just do it, like it's one of the things I learned where I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to ask. Just ask.
Totally. I mean, to make a long story short, I did not end up being a colorist. Marvel did not hire me as a colorist. DC did not hire me as a colorist. But I mean, I kind of think I'm probably better for it. Like I really am happy with where I'm at in my career right now. But still, I learned so much. But yes, you're exactly right. Doesn't happen to be a yes all the time. but sometimes it is.
Yeah. Well, also those things that don't end up happening, where like you're not a colorist now, you didn't get hired at Marvel or DC, but all of those things went in to you
Big time.
and ended up leading into, even if maybe you didn't know it at the time, it's just so interesting to see those things sort of butterfly effect out into who you end up becoming.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. You never know where these things are going to lead or how they'll influence you.
Right.
Yeah.
With autobio specifically, I was super interested in a couple things in one bite at a time. Specifically, and then one day number 6, where you talk about you wanted to remove yourself as much as possible, which is an interesting concept in and of itself, that you want to try to remove yourself as much as possible from the process of you creating comics that are about you. But there was a quote in there where somebody was talking about how autobio comics are just as untrustworthy and just as much fiction as actual fiction. So you were trying to sort of subvert that by interviewing people through these postcards, and the whole thing is very cool. It's a cool setup. I would love to know how you arrived at the idea of taking yourself out of a comic that is about you, and what you're trying to accomplish with this is kind of a bigger question. We don't have to necessarily get into it right now, but just your aim with writing autobio comics. Is it to understand yourself, the world? Is it a combination of them? And I think I'm so interested in the idea of a successful autobio comic and what that means. That's a lot right there, sort of shotgunned at you. So you can pick and choose what you want out of there.
Sure. Yeah. I'll probably tangent around
Sure.
what you just said, and you can redirect me if needed. But um, aims for autobio, yes, it's to understand self, but it's funny with nonfiction and autobio, there's power in specificity. You feel like, oh, well, I should get general with this and not be so specific because then it will relate to more people. But the exact opposite is true. Like if you start becoming really vulnerable and very specific about what happened in your own life, it's uncanny how many people it affects and how people come back to you. I've had people come to me and say, I had that very same experience, or I totally empathize with your feelings in this particular situation. And I'm not holding myself up as the be all autobio cartoonist, but I did start to really want to explore the genre more. I started out with those single page strips and moved on to a sketchbook. And then in grad school, I found that theory that you mentioned stating that autobio is no more truthful or valid than fiction, which really got my wheels turning. So I was just really thinking about this for quite a while during grad school and wondering what I could do to make autobiography more objective than it already is. And so I came up with this plan that you mentioned to interview a bunch of people in my life about me. But if I were face to face with them, then I would definitely be, uh, you know, they would likely hamper their answers if I
Oh,
were right in
sure.
front of them asking them about myself.
Yep.
So I came up with this box of flashcards and put each person in an isolated room and let them answer the questions into a tape recorder. And it was very interesting how this like reality show mentality sort of set in, and they stopped realizing that they were being recorded and just started being very candid with their answers. I heard a lot of stuff through that process that I'd never heard before. So I think it worked pretty well.
Yeah.
So yeah, that project. Am I missing something in your grand question?
No, well, I guess just those aims with autobio and what's a successful autobio comic. I mean, it's sort of a hard question to pin down it because what is successful art is not really necessarily something that's easily answered. But I think the idea of what I think it is you doing autobio comics for as long as you did and then no longer doing autobio comics is a thing that I'm that I'm curious about. Like,
Yeah.
did you do it? Did you figured it out? Like, what happened?
That's a great question. I had a big existential crisis right around the time I stopped doing it
Yeah.
because, okay, so just to dive into your previous question a little bit more, I shifted formats for, and then one day number 6, which was like this hybrid autobiography documentary. I still had a lot of questions about autobio theory that I wanted to discuss with someone. So I got together with an advising professor of mine at the time. His name was Dr. Harry Polkenhorn. And we had a conversation, recorded that. I turned that into comics form as well. And then I moved to Michigan. I became a father. I was proposing a lot of new resources at Michigan State University, where I was teaching. I was trying to make myself invaluable, making programmatic changes, building a minor course of study. And I say all that not to toot my own horn, but to say that there was a while in my trajectory there, about 5 years, half a dozen years, where I did not come out with a book. And toward the latter part of those 5-ish years, I started feeling really bad about myself, really sad, really like what is wrong? Why am I feeling this way? And when you're in it, it's harder to see, but with a little bit of distance, I was able to realize, oh, well, you were being a dad, you were making programmatic changes, you were trying to cement a spot for yourself in a Big Ten university. None of that is easy. All that takes a lot of time, and because of that, I was not producing. But I finally came to the self-realization, I need to foster my own work too. I cannot only help others, I also have to help myself. And that's something that I get a little worried about for other educators and folks who are outputting for others constantly, like other teachers or even podcasters or people who are doing a service for others. I try to talk to them about, like, hey, what are you doing for you? How are you nurturing your own personal projects? And it's a delicate balance. So anyway, all that to say, at the endish of those 5 years where I finally realized, okay, look, I need to get back into things. Um, I was into pinball in a big way. And when I moved to Michigan, I discovered this little arcade called Pinball Pete's. It's in East Lansing, Michigan. It's still here, and it's great. I love it. And there was a little flyer they put up about a pinball event. And I was like, they have pinball events? What the heck is this? Like, okay, I'll go see what this is. Spent 9 straight hours pinballing my brains out. And at that
So
point,
long.
it was so long, and I was young enough where I could do it. But I remember laying down on a bench and like, oh, this is a lot. All right, back to it.
Back to
it. So after that, I was like, man, this is amazing. There's so many incredible games. The history of the industry is so interesting. I love the artwork combined with the mechanics and electronics and the gameplay and the competition. Like, all of it was very exciting to me, to the point where I started thinking, man, I wonder, like, I kind of want to make a book about pinball. And I was really having an existential crisis, like questioning self. Like, I've built my career around autobio cartooning. That's what I've done for the past decade. That's what I've explored. This is how people know me. Is anybody going to pick this thing up or care if I do a book about pinball? And I was really quite worried about it. Ultimately, I put it out with my great bud Nick Baldridge, who co-wrote the issue with me, and I fully illustrated it. And man, I'm just so proud of that issue still today, because it would not have been what it is without the collaboration with Nick. Every image is so meticulously honed, in an effort to make it as authentic as possible. He's a tech genius, and I would hand him these technical drawings, and he's like, "That's great, but you forgot the solder tabs, and don't forget this lead over here." And like
Oh yeah,
everything
that's
is
important.
as it should be. And
Yeah.
one of the best comments I got from that issue, somebody bought it at our release. We released it at the Texas Pinball Festival, which is like, the biggest pinball show around these days. And this older guy used to operate games, bought an issue, took it back to his hotel room that night, came back the next day. He's like, I wish that documents like this existed when I was learning how to
Oh,
work
that's
on
awesome.
electromechanical games. I was like, "Whoa," it still gives me chills just thinking about his response to it. It was, yeah. Anyway,
That's super
so
awesome.
very, very glad that I, I, I eventually went through with that process
Oh
of
yeah.
allowing myself to do things besides autobio comics.
Well, I'm interested. I had a few questions around this specifically because writing, it's very, very publicly not acknowledged as the solitary pursuit, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
And cartooning, you're writing it, you're illustrating it, you're lettering it, you're doing all of those things. Very, very solitary as well. And I'm super interested in your relationship with collaboration, specifically with that volume. It's the only volume that you completed of that magazine. And
So far.
so far, hey, there you go. Nice. Um, I'm just really curious about the ways in which your cartooning led into that and collaborating with another creative person and switching away from being in such a solitary thing to something where you not necessarily are answering to someone else, but just the idea that it's not just your thoughts. It's not just your creation.
Yeah, that was a big step for me because I came out of elementary school and high school having been the one in group projects to carry the load, and
Yeah.
I after that I was not interested in group projects anymore. And so autobio work, here I come. I can do everything on my own. And when I got interested in pinball, I met this lovely person, Nick Baldridge, who we became fast friends, and he's just one of my best confidants these days. And so, to the point where we vacation with each other's family every summer, and it's just a very good relationship.
Yeah.
He's a saint. And so it was during one of these family summer vacations, he and I were staying up and chatting. And I said, you know, I've been really into this Drop Target zine. It's a self-published magazine put out by a couple cartoonists, Alec Longstreth and John Chad, about pinball, but it's mainly about modern pinball. And Nick and myself were both interested in electromechanical pinball games, which are games that were produced prior to 1978. So basically, instead of printed circuit boards, you're working with things like switches that you can see that either connect or don't, and making that binary either on or off. All sorts of visible devices rather than hidden inside a circuit board. So I was talking to Nick, and we sort of brainstormed, and I said, what would you think about collaborating on a publication like this? But let's make it a little different. Let's focus on EM, electromechanical games. Let's make it full color. Drop Target Zine was black and white. Let's make illustrations on every single page. Drop Target had every other page and some photographs, but I'm like, I want this to be fully illustrated. I don't want any photographs. I want this to be like a very hand wrought publication. And so even the font is like made out of my own handwriting. So anyhow, it was through that brainstorm session with Nick that we were bouncing ideas off one another and got really excited. And then over the next 2.5 years, we created Coin Op Carnival.
There's in there, you said a couple things. I'm super interested in how it seems like everything that you do that I'm aware of that's in One Bite at a Time, there's a physical aspect to it. You have some sort of physical thing. You're screen printing covers, you're doing neon signs. You're making things rather than just the words on the page, which obviously, yes, is making a thing, but I'm talking about like actual physical objects. And I'm so interested in the ways in which that changes the creative process, especially when you see the thing become, like, you see the words, the design, the idea become a thing. I'm really, really curious about, well, I'm always curious about success and failure, but the idea of seeing a thing and recognizing it as what you wanted to make versus being like, well, this isn't what I wanted to make, but I still like it. Talk to me about that kind of like nebulous zone of, okay, I'm making a thing, especially like with this book, which is a gorgeous book. I'm just curious about taking the thing in your head and putting it into three-dimensional space and real life. What's that process feel like? And I guess not just with writing, but in general, because I know how it feels for me. I'm just so curious how it feels for other people.
Yeah. Well, first, you're right. I am very interested in the physical object, the tangible object. Like, even in gaming, like, give me a cartridge. I want to stick it in
Yes. Yeah.
a unit of some sort, handheld, television, what have you. And so, yes, I'm very interested in the physical product. And because of that, I'm also very interested in the design of that project. And so you can see, even way back when in my first comics, just like you were quoting, those very first books were hand pulled, screen printed covers, trying to do something a little different than you see, but within my shoestring budget at the time and audience of zero, like trying to make something special. And every book was like a little bit of a leg up, trying to one up myself from the project before. Like, okay, now I have enough of an audience to do an offset print run. Okay, now maybe I'll include French folds or textured cardstock for the cover, or any number of different things that sort of go to augment the book itself. And that's the other thing that I try my best not to simply make wacky formatting for wacky formatting's sake.
Right.
Like, each of them are deliberate choices designed to augment the content of the piece itself. Like in Autobio Conversations, and then One Day Number 6 that you mentioned, it's about a bunch of different people talking about me. And so you see the reflective silver foil on the cover, but that foil is on my shorts on the cover. It's, talking about, a lot of people talked about my sense of fashion or lack thereof in these like shiny basketball shorts I was wearing. But then if you flip the book over, you can see the image of me from the cover is now like sort of downcast and looking into the shiny shorts, like sort of wondering about oneself. But it's also like this mirror image, this reflective image, like I can see myself, or maybe the reader can see themselves in that foil, project themselves into this story. So I'm trying to think about this in a considered way. Um, I think you also asked in there uh, something that gives me uh, trepidation whenever a project is coming to fruition. I have these grand ideas. I want it to turn out just so. I've picked my Pantone colors. I I know what I want it to look like, and it's never 100%. Um, I think the closest I've ever got, and I'm not just saying this because I'm here with you on a book tour,
Sure.
but I sincerely think that this book, One Bite at a Time, is the closest I've ever got to everything turning out just how I want it, which is crazy because it's the most ambitious book design I've ever done in my life. And to have so many things turn out just as I've asked is a big testament to the printer that I used to make this book. So, uh, yes, big props out to them. Rich Color Printing, thank you so much for helping me with this project. And not only did they do a great job, but they dealt with me for a real long time. Like this project, I have emails dating back to over a year ago,
Yeah.
starting the conversation about, hey, here's a quote. What do you think? They would send me samples, and we'd work forward. And I was, simultaneously finishing the book. But every couple months or so, I would say, hey, what about this new cockamamie idea? What if we have vellum overlays?
I was
Can
gonna say,
you
let's
align
do
that? Just
some circle cutouts in this
yes,
page.
yes. So every couple months I'd contact them, and they never got tired of me. They always just told me, yes, we can do it. And this is how much it'll cost, putting the power in my court, allowing me to make that decision. And that was super important to me. And they came through in spades. It was, yeah,
It,
a great relationship.
it does kind of make you wonder if it's ever possible to have it turn out exactly like you imagine it, if it's even
Right.
possible.
Yeah,
Like,
there's
do we set ourselves up for that, like, just even a little bit different? Is it not possible to achieve? I'm always curious about that.
yeah, I wonder too. Like I said, this book is as close as I've ever got. There's, I think mainly because, we just sort of like work through some design challenges together. Like if you take a look at the cover, for example, it's dual cloth bound, dual foil stamped. And originally, I had in my initial quote proposal, I wanted a die cut hole in the middle of the cover to reveal, like, I wanted to have the end papers be like a big countdown, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 20, have some image, and the 20 would be showing through the book cover. But then you could open it up and see, oh, this is showcasing all the different years that he's been doing this. Um, and when they came back, they said, well, we can do cloth binding, we can do die cut on the cover, but we can't do both. I mean, we can, but if you die cut cloth, essentially that cloth is going to fray on the
Yep,
edges
Frey.
after a couple reads, and it's going to look like garbage. So I redesigned my cover, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, all that to say, it was another really big collaborative process working with the printer, and they just knocked it out of the park.
Well, for me, thinking about it from that aspect, like, here's the thing I want, and then somebody's like, well, you can't really do that because of this, this, and this. From a writing standpoint, or even just, I mean, production standpoint too, the process sort of seems like it's ongoing, even when you're not doing the thing that you would classify it as. Like, cartooning seems sort of like you're just in stage like A.53 of writing, where it's like you in the book, in the back of One Bite at a Time, you lay out your process, and you say you write out scripts, you show your process through all of these thumbnails of things that you're doing. But I was curious about if you feel like you are continually writing a comic, and I know it's sort of maybe subjective, or maybe a little bit of a word game. Like, are you writing when you're editing and those things? But I'm curious with cartooning and some of the other stuff that you've done, if writing feels almost like it's just continually happening as you're illustrating, because with cartooning especially, there's so many subtleties and facial expressions and body language and stuff. And do you think of those things as writing, or am I just a total wacko?
No, I'm completely on board with you. I just wanted to let you finish your thought before I interrupted. But yes, yes, yes. I think all those things, meaning I think that I'm writing when I'm pressing keys on the keyboard, but then when it's time to lay out a page, I'll, plunk down the words in the narration boxes and the speech balloons and estimate where heads are going to go and background's going to be, and start thinking about composition within each panel, composition on the whole page itself. And so there's, as I mentioned in the introduction for the book, it's this custom puzzle solving
Yeah.
experience, right? On every single page. And that can happen in the macro or the micro, from storytelling and honing the words itself, to thinking about the layout of the page, to thinking about the layout of the panel, to thinking about the layout of the speech balloon, to, all kinds of different things. So yes, I think that, so personally, I start by a more traditional form of writing, pressing the keys on the keyboard. And then I use that to place into a page layout. So basically, I'm laying out my panels, trying to figure out how big they're going to be, what shape they're going to be, why they're that shape, why they're that big, why they're that small, what's going to go inside. And then once I have those words placed around, then I start thinking about composition within each panel in a little more honed way, because it's such a crazy process. Of course, I'm thinking about composition back when I'm laying out panels, because is this going to be big? Like, do I have a big landscape to showcase, or is it a climactic plot point? Then I need a big panel to showcase that. Do I want something that's more democratically structured and layout in a way that it has a bunch of panels in the same size to indicate like a really regular cadence or pattern in the timescape that's unfolding. So all that is taking place in the layout. But then when I get to thinking about what's inside the panel, okay, now I'm working in this big panel. How is this landscape going to work? That also feels. I like your thought of it also being writing,
Yeah.
because in my mind, that stage when I'm penciling is like the thinky stage of comics. And when I've penciled and I'm ready to start inking, it's like, oh, whew, I wipe my brow. I can sort of shift into robot mode. I can toss in a podcast, do whatever I want. But just like writing traditionally, when I'm penciling, I cannot have distractions.
Yeah.
Like, that's the part where I need to be fully engaged. But inking, lettering, coloring, all that, okay, come talk to me. I can grab a bite to eat while I'm doing the same thing. But those initial stages, writing and penciling, those feel very similar to me.
So I can't draw. So that's where this question's coming from. Because when I write comics, I write full script. I'm working with an artist. And then my best friend, DC Hopkins, he's a letterer. He's lettered everything that I've done. And the more experienced and I would like to hope, more knowledgeable I've gotten about what should go into a page and how it's going to be structured and all those things that I'm thinking about as I'm writing. Even when I do those things, I'm still working with another person who's creating the art. So I am still sort of relying on them to bring some of the stuff to the page, especially layout, depending on how descriptive I want to be. And have been plenty of times when I've written my script, and more recently when I'm like, okay, I don't need to use as many words. I don't need this many words. We can cut this down. Even still doing that, DC, I know him as David, but he goes by DC in the books, will text me and be like, dude, there's too many words in this panel. And I'm like, okay, yeah, let's cut them. So let's cut them. So the reason the reason I say all of that is just to talk to you about you being the person who's in control of everything. And there's one page comics and some smaller stuff in one bite at a time, that you are dealing with a really, really, really minimal amount of words. And I love seeing that. Specifically, there's a comic in there of your dad trying to get up off the ground, which I loved. And I was curious how often you end up in a place where you're like, I can't use this many words. Like, I have to cut this. I've got to cut all of these things. Is that common? Are you, because you're at every single step of the process, are you able to head that off pretty quickly, or doesn't happen?
Again, I'd say both. I think mostly because I'm involved in every part of the process, I can usually understand, all right, I need to pare this word count down because I think this is going to go in a smaller panel. But inevitably, I overwrite a panel. I have too many words for the space allotted. Sometimes the space that gets laid out after I type the words, I didn't know that it was going to be that small, so I have to make some adjustments. And comics are so malleable. So does that mean I'm going to increase the size of the panel itself to account for that? Or do I need to edit words down to account for the smaller panel size? there's a number of different ways it can go. So because I'm in charge of all that, I can make those editorial decisions kind of on the fly. But yes, 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 I am not perfect in my word count all the time,
I'm
and
happy.
I need to edit myself too. Yes.
Well, another thing you talk about, it's one of I think you said it's maybe it was the very first issue of And Then One Day, where you do bite-sized comics, where you're talking about avoiding the overwhelming aspect of longer projects. And that's something that I've become way, 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 way more interested in the older I've gotten, because I said, I'm going to write a graphic novel. I'm going to write a series. And a sort of like big bang went off in my mind one time when I started contemplating one-page comics.
Mhm.
And those then became the thing that I was kind of obsessed with. So I want to talk to you about the way that you incorporate length of story, size of publication, which it's sort of a two-parter, but we'll get to the second part here in a second. But the ways in which you are incorporating the physical size of the object into your creation, and how you ended up arriving at those bite-sized comics, and also what role they play into your life, maybe potentially still, because you mentioned teaching those and that format specifically. So talk to me about all that.
Yeah. So I'm a big proponent of starting small.
Yes.
And I I had a number of fits and starts with comics prior to my first issues of And Then One Day, my autobio comic series, which were single page strips. And because they were single page strips, they were self contained. Each page was a different day for my life. And when I finished that page, I had a sense of accomplishment. I didn't feel like, boy, howdy, there's 379 pages to go now that I've done number one. I'm like, wow, look at this. I finished a thing. And I felt real good about that. Prior to making those, I tried some longer stories, some 24-page stories, and I still have unfinished pages sitting in my drawer from more than 20 years ago. And looking back, I realize, okay, that was too big. That was too big of a hill to tackle. I have a cartoonist buddy. His name's Alec Lonstreth, and he likens cartooning to mountain climbing. He's like, okay, you can do a 4-panel strip, and that's like, you know, taking an easy hike up a local berm, or you can do a 24-page comic, and that's like, doing a Black Diamond Hill or something, and then you can do a graphic novel, and that's like K2, and then you can do a larger version that's like, think of the biggest hill you can climb. So I was trying to start on too big of a mountain. And when I pared that down to single pages and could feel that sense of accomplishment, it's no wonder, looking back, that that's what finally stuck. And that was my first comic. So, yes, I'm a big proponent of starting small. In fact, I organize my college classes in such a way where we start with a real small project. It's a 2 to 3 page artist statement comic. I want my students to tell me about what they're interested in and why they do that. It can be comics, but it doesn't have to be. It could be pottery or painting or underwater basket weaving or volleyball or whatever. But tell me what you're into, and then tell me why that's important for you to do and others to intake. Those are some big questions for undergrads, but I think it's a crying shame to wait until grad school to ask artists, why are you doing this?
Why?
Why are you doing what you're doing?
Yep.
And because nobody asked me till I was in grad school, and then I was thrown on my heels. And it's not like these undergrads that are in my class have to get a right answer,
Yeah.
but it does start them on the path of critical thinking and thinking about their own work. And that can change over time. I mean, look at me. Started out in autobio. very different from the pinball artwork I was doing 10 years later. So like your interest can change. Just because you put something on paper doesn't mean it's going to be that for the rest of your life. But I think it is a good practice to think about, why do we do these things that we do? So yes, small project focus is a really powerful thing, because boy howdy is it ever easy to get burnt out on a bigger project and just not finish it.
Yep, absolutely. It can overwhelm and crush you. And seeing your the smaller comics and knowing that you taught that stuff, or can you still teach it, I was very excited to see that. Sort of related to some of that, the why specifically, and we don't have to spend too much time on it, but we can. Just depends on. I was curious. You wrote a couple times in the book about being in grad school, undergrad and grad school, and struggling with the legitimacy of comics within the artistic world.
Yep.
And I'm constantly shaking my fist at the sky when I see people dismissing comics. It still happens. It still happens in the New York Times. It still happens in all kinds of places. And one thing that I was super interested in, and maybe it was just my like weird analytical, like, let's find an angle kind of thing. I love that your response was size. You were like, okay, so I'm going to make a comic in, I think it was grad school. Maybe it might've been undergrad. I can't remember, where you were like, I'm going to print it as big as I can manage on the press that I have. And it came out on a 14 by 20 print. So I'm curious about size, which we've already talked about a little bit with length but aiming for legitimacy within a world that seems to reduce comics to like, oh, that's cute, or oh yeah, look at the pictures, oh, that's funny. Talk to me about this.
Yeah. Well, part of so I went to graduate school at San Diego State University, and part of the master's program as you go through is to have an exhibition of your work. And that's great for all these traditional media, painting, sculpture, what have you. But then we had this pocket of weirdos within a department of weirdos, right? We had like the traditional stuff, but then it was called a multimedia emphasis. And that was everything from digital art to photography to installation art to comics. So like all the sort of the island of misfit toys was over here. So I was trying to figure out, all right, so there's this requirement of an exhibition. How do I make comics fit a gallery environment? And I've seen comics in a gallery before, but it's always this really awkward experience of like, you post the original artwork on the wall, and then like, what are you supposed to do as a viewer? Like stand and read a comic? Like that's really
It's
the
weird.
worst way to read a comic,
It's weird.
right? So one of the ways I was thinking about in incorporating comics into the gallery space a little more was size. That was one of the ways. And I actually created this 11-foot tall by 17-foot wide series of panels.
Holy
It was
crap.
four sheets of 4x8 MDF that I painted, rolled out white paint and then hand painted with black, made like little wobbly panel borders on the side because I wanted it to all look hand drawn, and then like skill sawed out this text on the bottom. And basically, size was only one component of fitting it to the gallery. Another thing I wanted to do was exemplify how comics could be a part of the fine art conversation. They can be fine art. They can comment on fine art. They don't have to be fine art. They're not always fine art, but they can be fine art. And so I took a canonical painting from Magritte, The Treachery of Images. And if your listeners haven't seen it, it's that like photorealistic painting of a pipe, and underneath it says "Ceci n'est pas un pipe," which means this is not a pipe. And so if you think about or see it for the first time, you might think, well, sure looks like a pipe to me. But if you think about it for any length of time, it's not a pipe. It's just some pigment slathered on a canvas that kind of looks like a pipe. But with the progression of history, that painting becomes more and more true. Because I don't know about you, Austin, but I've never seen that painting in person before.
Nope.
So it's a photograph of paint slathered on a canvas, even further removed from its pipeness. Or now, in all likelihood, you're seeing pixels on a screen of a photograph of paint slathered on canvas. It kind of looks, further and further removed from its pipeness. But this series of panels I illustrated and made gigantic to fill a gallery wall was essentially 4 panels of me holding a pipe and smoking it and kind of like looking knowingly at the camera. And the pipe was, of course, the Magritte's pipe. It was illustrated to look just like that. And underneath these 4 gigantic panels were this series of skill sawed out text that said ceci n'est pas un intervalle du temps, which means this is not a span of time. And so it's talking about how comics can be in this same conversation too. We're not an ignorant medium. We understand art history. We understand these conversations. And so all of that was to say, all right, we belong here. I belong here. It's not that every professor was opposed to comics being in the program, or else I wouldn't be there.
Right.
But there were certainly professors in the program who were opposed to comics being there. So I felt like I had to address that in some of my work.
It was super interesting to see those things and to think about the size of the work. And I wanted to talk to you about the ways in which that maybe is still influencing you, because One Bite at a Time is a big book.
It's a big boy.
It's
isn't
a
it?
big book. It's obviously it's an art book. So, there's a sort of a standardized size people think about when they think about coffee table books and art books. But I was curious if there is still a part of you that's like, you're going to notice this. Like, I'm going to make sure you see this.
That was not my initial thought. I wonder if that's like buried inside
That's what
me
I'm
somewhere that I
curious
wasn't
about.
aware of. But no, I was really trying to think of the best way to showcase a lot of different media that I'd not been able to print before. Like I'd never printed my neon signs. I'd never printed my watch designs. I'd never printed in a book some of these larger scale comics that I've done, like the piece you mentioned about my dad getting up off the ground, this giant gallery wall piece, and even thinking about some of these specialty formatting things I wanted to do to showcase process and make an authentic experience for the reader. And I'm thinking of one in particular right now, the MSU Comics Forum poster I did in 2009, where there's this like vertical gatefold element. So I have to stop being printer jargony, but essentially the pages fold downward. So instead of opening the 9x12 book up to 18x12, you now have a piece of paper in front of you that's 18x24. And that was the original size of the original artwork that I used to illustrate that poster. So now you're sitting there with a very authentic size piece or a reproduction of the original artwork in your lap. So that was just one of the many ways I used this specialty formatting to augment this theme of process.
And that is awesome too. Like, for listeners, it literally just is like a poster folds out of the book. This big poster folds out and you've got this poster hanging out of the book. It's very cool. I think the thing I keep thinking about is your trajectory with comics, ending up at MSU teaching about comics and being a big part of there even being comics to be taught about at MSU. And whether or not, we kind of talked about it a little bit already when you mentioned your existential crisis, but whether or not teaching about comics changed your relationship with making comics.
Undoubtedly.
I wondered how do you think it's changed it?
I think it's made me a far more confident artist. I remember in my early days of making comics feeling overwhelmed about the number of choices that I had. There's a lot of choices to make in a page of comics, not only the writing and the storytelling, but the layout, like, okay, it's time to make a panel. Well, how big is this panel? All right. And what's the shape of this panel? Oh gosh. And how many people are going to be in it? I don't know. And is it close? I don't know. Is it far away? Oh, who knows? Oh gosh, this is so much to think about. But now I've come to the point where, and I tell my students this too, it's true. There's a lot of choices you can make, but allow the story to dictate what's happening on the page. So if you're introducing a scene, chances are you need an establishing shot to show where you are. If you're doing an establishing shot, it's usually going to be probably something a little bigger, a little wider than usual to showcase that landscape. So account for that on the page. Is something a climactic plot point? Then maybe you want to emphasize that somehow. If not by size, then maybe by color or even shape of the panel. But allow what's happening in the story to dictate what's happening on the page. You can augment what's happening in the story through things like panel size, panel shape, cadence of panels. I talked about those democratic grid structures where panels are the same size, giving that regular cadence and rhythm. So I've become much more at ease with writing and formatting now than I used to be before I started teaching, because as a teacher, you've got to concretize your thoughts and theories about the medium in which you're working. And so, in the process of doing that, and not only creating a curriculum, but repeating this curriculum myself, I have to say it multiple times a semester over the course of many years, that gets ingrained. And another thing that's been super helpful to me is that I have to articulate to students what's working and what's not and why. And after critiquing literally thousands of comics, my personal thoughts on comics have become very honed, and to the point where uh, that sounds like I'm a jerk saying that, but I feel like
I don't think
it's
so.
it's honed in a way where I feel confident that if there's a story I want to tell, I can construct it in such a way that I feel good about it. Not that I'm the best cartoonist, but comparing that to how I felt in the beginning of my career, I would feel very unsure of myself. Like, should this have been a close up shot? I don't know. Should it have been a far shot? Like, I remember those feelings, and now I don't feel those feelings nearly as much. And I think that's because of teaching.
See, that's so funny because the thing I was curious about was almost connected to that, but off sort of tangentially to the side, which was not necessarily is it harder to make comics now, but is it, I don't want to say less rewarding. I'm just so curious about breaking something down, especially over and over and over again, and the ways in which that plays on your creativity. I guess maybe I'm really just wondering if creating comics became a thing where you're like, okay, I need to do the thing for me now. That's going to be a neon sign. It's not going to be comics.
That's really true.
I'm curious.
You're right.
I've talked about that with David. He's a letterer, and we've worked in comics for a bit, and just the idea of that your relationship with the thing that you spend so much time with changes. So I'm curious if you do gravitate towards not making comics as much, or if you feel like they take up enough of your time that it's like, okay, I'm going to do some pinball stuff now.
You're totally right. I was going to say comics have become harder, and this is on the heels of me telling you that comics have become easier.
Well, I
So
think that
I understand that I'm contradicting myself.
I think they both can be true though. Like your understanding of the art form and the process can get easier, but that doesn't mean sitting down to make them is easier.
Because in that process, you're likely doing more complex things, and that takes longer. It's a little harder, and it takes a lot of brain power. Whereas before, I think I think the brain power for me was more spent on worrying about if I was doing it right. And
Hmm.
now it's not worrying if I'm doing it right. It's like executing it a in a honed and professional way. Like I understand what's in my mind and I want to get it on the page. And I'm not a classically trained illustrator. I never took an illustration program. I was always in a fine art program. So that's kind of my um I guess that's my wow, words are eluding me. Not Achilles heel, but like if I had a trepidation about or a worry about something that I was not as good as I should be, that would
Yeah.
probably be it. Like I can look at animators and say, "Oh God, that's beautiful," and I can see the movement and the flow. And whereas my work it feels more hard won. Theirs feels more uh, lyrical and flowy and natural. And I feel like, all right, I'm still working on this figure drawing thing. Like I can make a figure happen, but it doesn't feel as easy as I see others
See,
do.
that's so hilarious because I guarantee you that I could show your work to, let's say, 50 people, and 50 people who are at least informed enough about comics or
Mhm.
illustration. And I could be like, do you think this artist was classically trained? And I bet 95% of them would be like, yeah.
That's interesting. I mean,
Well, yeah, my interaction with your work is like you saying those things to me is it's like, well, I mean, there's part of me that's just like laughing because I'm like, I know what your art looks like. It's so funny the ways in which we do those things, though.
to ourselves.
To
Yeah,
ourselves, especially. Yeah,
totally.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think sort of wrapping up here with one bite at a time, summing up 20 years of your work, and I'm so curious to know if it feels like you are at the beginning of something, or if it's like, how does it feel? What's it feel like?
um this project has really been a roller coaster. It's this has taken 5 years to put together. 20 if you count all the work inside, but
Right.
working on the book, bona fide working on it, half a decade. That's a long time.
Yeah.
Like that's I'm getting up to K2 area where I'm mountain climbing.
Yeah.
I couldn't have done that 20 years ago. So in the middle of it, it's you know, uh, that old adage, I'm eating my elephant.
Yep.
And as it gets closer, it's like, oh boy, it's getting close to fruition, but that final 10% feels like it takes 90% of the time. As it gets closer, it's like, oh my God, is this ever going to be here? Is this ever going to be done? There's like so many revisions right at the end that I felt like I needed to do, and was continually adding pages up to the very end. You look at the Kickstarter campaign that I ran, and the page count is larger than what I quoted on there. Um, so going through that 5-year process was really interesting because it's the longest I've worked on a book. Having it in my hands is like rewarding and emotional and surreal, and so gratifying that so many things turned out like I hoped they would. But I might be misinterpreting your question, but I sort of felt like maybe it was, is this the end? But it's not the end.
No, I was
I have a
curious
lot. I,
that.
I have enough projects in the back of my brain that I will never be able to complete them all before I die. And I am excited to continue for the next 20 years and beyond. But this was just sort of like a mile marker for me, and sort of stepping back and being able to see this book printed, not even like in the process, but like the book arrived and I sat down and opened it in my lap and read through it. And it was I don't even know how to describe it. It's like if somebody, if you go to a foreign country and you come back and somebody's like, oh, how was it? How was your experience? It's hard to even know where to start.
Yeah.
And I feel like that a little bit with this project, that it was so big and involved and emotional. Like it was an emotional experience going through it for the first time physically in the book.
I don't think you misinterpreted my question. I didn't mean to end as in like, and now you're done.
Yeah.
In the sense of like, it's always weird to try and be like, what's next? Because especially after you've done so much work, because seeing the book, even just for me specifically, if I create a thing and sometimes I'll beat myself up over like, oh, I'm not doing enough. I didn't do enough this year. I didn't do enough over the course of these 5 years. But then I end up like looking or really paying attention, and I'm like, oh, I did way more than I thought I did.
Yeah.
And seeing your book, I had that feeling for you where I was like, look at all the stuff that he did. And that leading into like, okay, that was the last 20 years. And I have all of this stuff just fighting to get out of me. I'm so happy to see you have the collection and to know that, yeah, like you still have that energy. You still have the other things that you're ready to do.
Yeah. I'm excited to keep making. I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. And I've had that question, like, is this your retrospective? Is this the end of your career? Are you done? Are you dusting your hands off? I'm like, no, not a chance. Like this is too much. I mean, as a creator, Austin, it's like ingrained in you. It's part of our psyche. There's no extracting us from it. It's always going to be part of what we do. And I look forward to hopefully many more years of creating.
I do too. It is a beautiful, beautiful book, a gorgeous object. I'm proud to have it on my shelf. Where can my listeners, you're on your virtual book tour. You'll have some actual in-person book tours. Where can they find you?
Yeah. If you by chance miss me in person on the book tour, you can always go to onebiteatatime.book.com. That's onebiteatatime.book.com. And that should take you straight to the page on my website that sells the book and others of mine as well.
And I really can't overstate it. It's a beautiful book. Everybody should check it out. It's gorgeous, and it will make your shelf just a little bit prettier. So make sure you check it out. Hey, I really appreciate you taking the time, Ryan. This was super awesome.
Austin, you made my day having me on your show. It's just been such a pleasure listening to your past many episodes, and I really have sincerely listened to every single one. So it's really a charge for me to be on here and finally chatting with you. So it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.
That was my chat with Ryan Claytor. Thank you so much, Ryan, for chatting. I had a blast. I love your book. I think it really is just an amazing way to look at how the creative mind works and to go on a journey with a person. And it seriously is just inspiration from cover to cover. I think it's gorgeous, and it really would look awesome on anybody's bookshelf. So again, go to onebiteatatimebook.com to grab a copy of it. And if you do, let me know. Let Ryan know. Follow him online. Tell us how you thought about the book and how it inspired you. That's always fun to hear. I appreciate you guys stopping by. Keep your eyes out for more information about my own work and about my forthcoming little bookshop, which I mentioned in the intro. I'm so insanely close to getting it ready to go and to be selling books. So watch out for that. And as for now, hey, go do some writing. See you next time.